Hello everyone. In continuation with the last lecture on the enzyme. In the last session, we have discussed the definition of the enzyme and their nomenclature and International Union of Biochemistry classification of the enzymes. In today's session, we are going to discuss uh, the enzymes in more details with their properties and various factors affecting their enzyme activity along with the coenzymes. Now, as we were lastly discussed, the enzymes, when they are active in the form, they are mostly made up of two subparts. One is the apoenzyme, which is a complete protein in nature, and another one is the coenzyme or prosthetic group. And when they both combine, apoenzyme combines with the coenzyme or prosthetic group, the whatever compound which is formed is said to be the holoenzyme. So holoenzyme is made up of a protein plus a non-protein part of the enzyme, and the apoenzyme is the totally the protein part, and coenzyme and prosthetic group are said to be the non-protein parts. And this is about the action activity of the or functional point of view. This holoenzyme is important because in the form of holoenzyme only, most of the enzymes, more than 95% of enzymes, they are active only in the form of holoenzymes. In the absence of that non-protein part, they are not actually active. But if you consider this structural point of view, the enzymes is made up of a protein and non-protein part. If you go into more details of the protein part in protein parts of that enzyme, it can be subclassified into three major types. That monomeric enzymes. Here you can see the monomeric enzymes, in which it is been said that it is only consist of structural point of view. It is only consist of the only one polypeptide chain, and examples here are the trypsin, ribonuclease, etc. Oligomeric enzymes are those enzymes which are made up of more than one polypeptide chains but less than 10 polypeptide chains. That's why it is said to be oligomeric enzymes. And it is example, if you want to have is lactate dehydrogenase, then creatine phosphokinase can be the examples. Then multi-enzyme complex examples are the pyruvate dehydrogenase fatty acid synthetase. uh, Apart from the this multi-enzyme complex, apart from the oligomeric enzymes, there one more property which is differentiating the multi-enzyme complex from the oligomeric enzymes is it can be made up of multiple polypeptide chains. Along with that, it is not a single enzyme structurally. It can have a multiple numbers of enzyme in its structural point of view. And as and when all these enzymes come together and get their proper configuration, 3D structure, then and then only that multi-enzyme complex is in active form. Otherwise, they are not active form in the absence of in the separated forms of individual enzymes in the multi-enzyme complex. This is one more classification what we can say regarding the enzymes when you consider the protein and non-protein parts. One more property related to enzyme is their specificity, and you know that it is a part of their unique property that enzymes are very specific. They are specific regarding the substrate. They are specific regarding the reaction to which they carry out, and they also specific regarding the substrate configuration, the stereochemical configuration or related. All these factors are very specific. The enzyme can only act on a very specific number of substrate only. So coming to the first, that is a substrate specificity, acts on only one type of a compound which is specific for him. So here, in turn, it can be classified into three types: absolute substrate specificity, then relative substrate specificity, and broad substrate specificity. Absolute substrate specificity, as the name suggests, it only act on the only one substrate, not more than one substrate. Say, for example, maltose, we can act only onto the maltose. Sucrase only can act on the sucrose. Then urease only can act on the urea. So these are the absolute substrate specific. They can these enzymes can act only on one type of substrate. That's why these are absolute substrate specificity. Relative substrate specificity acting on a particular linkage or bond. Here example is the trypsin and chymotrypsin. Trypsin can only hydrolyzes peptide linkage involving the arginine and lysine. So whenever there is in the that peptide bond, if the arginine and lysine are present, then only trypsin can break that bond. In the absence of these two amino acids in the peptide linkage, the trypsin will be not active. And on the other hand, chymotrypsin cleaves only the bonds in which aromatic amino acids are involved. Aromatic amino acids, that phenylalanine, tyrosine, when they are present in that condition only, this chymotrypsin can active. The enzyme is in the active form. Another substrate specificity is broad substrate specificity. Can act on many similar substrates. Hexokinase is the very beautiful example what we can say regarding the broad specificity. Hexokinase can act on glucose, fructose, mannose, and glucosamine, but not on the galactose. But few example exceptions are there, but comparatively, hexokinase can act on so many types of hexoses. That's why the name given it as a hexokinase, and it can act on the glucose, fructose, and mannose, and so on. So that's why it is a relatively very broad specific regarding when you consider the substrate of that specific enzyme. Another specificity is the reaction specificity. Reaction specificity sorry, stands here uh, because any one substrate can undergo different type of chemical reaction, whether it is a amination type, decarboxylation type, or reduction type, oxidation type, or any type of chemical reaction it can undergo depending upon the type of enzyme present around it. So this is nothing but the reaction specificity of the enzymes. So here, this oxaloacetic acid, it can undergo decarboxylation reaction to form the pyruvic acid. It can undergo any amination reaction to form the aspartic acid, or OA can undergo to get it formed to the malic acid when it undergoes the reduction type of reaction. But it only possible when the decarboxylates, aminase, or reductase, these enzymes are there around it, then and then only these types of reaction are possible respectively. So can you are you able to understand it properly? We can undergo to the to get oxaloacetic acid can form pyruvic acid only when the decarboxylase enzyme is there. It cannot form the pyruvic acid in the presence of amination aminase enzyme, or it cannot form the aspartic acid in the presence of the reductase enzyme. So specific that type of enzyme should be there around it, and there that reaction is possible only in the presence of that enzyme only. So this is nothing but the reaction specificity. Another is the specificity related to the enzymes is the stereochemical specificity. It also depicts the enzyme can attack on only a particular stereochemical form of a substrate. Example is L-arginase acts on L-arginine and not on the D-arginine. D-glucose oxidase acts on the D-glucose and not on the L-glucose. So stereochemically also the enzymes are very specific. That's why in the human body it is been said that D-glucose is absorbed, D-glucose is metabolized, but not the L-glucose. So stereochemical property are also important, and that should fit into that active portion of the enzymes. Then and then only that enzyme can act on the specific substrate. Otherwise, it will not. So if you compare these substrate specificity, then reaction specificity, stereochemical specificity, what can be the importance? See here, try to read this sentence very carefully. Specificity makes it possible for a number of enzymes to coexist in the cell without interfering in each other's reaction. Without interfering in each other's reaction. So in the presence of in that only due to this property of enzyme of specificity only, all the enzymes can coexist at the same time and with a higher concentration also without interfering each other's activity. Otherwise, the all the reaction would have taken place very randomly, and actually the purpose would have not been possible, and the purpose of metabolism or catabolism, anabolism could not have been possible in the human body. This property of substance, any type of specificity only makes this situation possible practically. Now coming to the another part of the enzyme is the coenzyme. The definition, we're coming to the definition part. The coenzyme are the non-protein in nature. Keep in please listen keep very carefully. They are non-protein in nature, dialyzable or easily detachable, relatively thermostable organic compounds associated with the enzyme activity is known as a coenzyme. So these are the few of the important features or characteristic property are there of the coenzymes. They are non-protein in part one. They are non-protein part, and they are dialyzable or easily detachable from the enzyme. Then relatively thermostable, whereas the enzyme itself is a thermolabile, but coenzyme is a thermostable. And another very important property of the coenzyme is they are organic, not inorganic. When they are organic, they are coenzyme. If they are inorganic, they are not coenzyme, they are the cofactor. So these are the four important property which are followed by the coenzymes. They non-protein, dialyzable, relatively thermostable, and organic in nature, and associated with the enzyme activity. And in the absence of the coenzymes, enzyme is no more active. Protein part of the conjugated protein are called as a apoenzyme, and while the non-protein part is called as a coenzyme, and total molecule is a holoenzyme, just what we have discussed earlier. So apoenzyme plus coenzyme is equal to holoenzyme. Some enzymes are active only in the presence of certain inorganic substances called as a cofactor. So the cofactors are the non-protein, dialyzable, it is also thermostable, but they are inorganic. And glucose, an example is the magnesium ions required for the hexokinase activity to form the glucose 6 phosphate from the glucose. And in that case, this is not a coenzyme, this is a cofactor as it is a inorganic in nature. Classification of the coenzymes. Coenzymes are classified on the type of group they transfer. Involved in the hydrogen transfer, the important members are NAD, NADP, FMN, FAD, lipoic acid, and coenzyme Q. NAD, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate, NADP, that is. Then flavin mononucleotide, flavin adenine dinucleotide, lipoic acid, coenzyme Q. They are all involved in the transfer of the hydrogen group from one to another. That's why they are taken under the same class. Another is the involved in to transfer other than the hydrogen from one trans substrate to another substrate, and they are nothing but the thymine pyrophosphate, then coenzyme A, biotin, folic acid, pyridoxal phosphate are the examples of the coenzymes which are involved in the transfer of the group other than the hydrogen. Functions, they are required in the oxidation reduction type of reaction. Coenzyme NAD, NADP acts as a hydrogen acceptor in the dehydrogenation reaction, which is very important for so many metabolic reactions. The chief function of the coenzyme A is to carry acyl group, and they are used in fatty acid synthesis. So they are used in the fatty acid synthesis. This is the biological functions of some coenzymes and their vitamins. You know that the most of the coenzymes they comes from the B complex vitamins. So what are the various B complex vitamins and their coenzyme form along with the type of chemical reaction they carry out. Thymine, it is involved in the thymine pyrophosphate formation, and they are required for the decarboxylation reaction. Then riboflavin, flavin mononucleotide, flavin adenine dinucleotide, they are required for the oxidation reduction reaction. Then pantothenic acid, coenzyme A formation, and it is required for the transfer of various groups. Then nicotinamide, NAD, NADP, they are also required for the oxidation reduction reaction. Then pyridoxine, pyridoxal phosphate, it is required for the transamination reaction of the liver functions. Then biotin, biotin itself is a coenzyme, it is for the CO2 fixation. And then folic acid, it is involved in the formation of THF4, and it is required for the one carbon transfer. So these are the few of the examples of the vitamin B complex vitamins and coenzyme coming from it and a type of reaction it carry out. This is overall effect. This figure actually explains the overall effect of the enzyme on the reactant and product. If say for example, this is the energy level in on the x-axis graph, and in the sorry, this is y-axis graph, energy, it is showing free energy, and on the x-axis progression of the reaction. If this is the level of energy of the reactants, and this is the level of energy of the products. So obviously, by seeing the energy level of the reactants and products, it must be exothermic chemical reaction. And this red line, it indicates in the absence of the enzyme, and this gray line indicates stands for the graph stands for the activation energy with the presence of the enzyme. So obviously we can see clear cut difference in the activation energy in the absence of the enzyme. The high energy or activation energy is required, whereas in the absence of the in the presence of the enzyme, less activation energy is required. And that's why it smoothens the it makes the more chances of to that chemical reaction to be taken place. And in the absence of that enzyme, that reaction will not be possible at the physiological homeostatic conditions. And this is a energy change in between the reactor and products. So enzyme effect is that it lowers the activation energy for the chemical reaction to carry out. Mechanism of enzyme action. This is there actually while describing the how the enzymes acts, there are three majority of times three theorems are there, which actually try to explain how the enzymes act. The first and foremost in that is the lock and key model. Lock and key model, it is invented by the Emil Fischer and also labeled as Emil Fischer's template theory. And in this theory, it has been said that substrate is like a key, and substrate is like a key, and lock is like a enzyme. So, and once that lock, any key, if it any key, if it matches with that lock internal structure, then only that key can unlock the that lock. In the absence of correctly fitted key, that lock cannot be unlocked. In the same manner, if the substrate clear it complementary fixes or it matches with the active portion of the enzyme, then and then only there is a chances of chemical reaction to be taken place. This is how the active site and the substrate, this portion of the substrate is going to bind with the active site, and you can see here they are complementary, matching with each other. They are complementary to each other and easily matches with each other. That's why there is a chances of ES complex formation, and there will be a further reaction will be possible. So in case of lock and key model, the active portion of the enzyme should match with the substrate configuration, configuration of the substrate, and they should be fit with each other. Then and then only there can be a chances of ES complex formation, and afterwards the reaction will be possible. Another theorem which is involved in the explanation or explaining the enzyme activity, how the enzyme activity takes place, is the Coastlands induced fit model. It is proposed in 1958 by the Daniel Coastland. And actually, this is comparatively, when you compare with the induced fit model with the lock and key model, is comparatively little bit different. Here, it has been suggested that after after the substrate comes into the vicinity of the active site, there is a conformational changes in the active site. It get and that active portion is a completely flexible structure, and it matches with the substrate, and there is a complementary fixing with each other, and formation of ES complex, that is enzyme substrate complex, and reaction is proceeded. So this is the induced fit model. It explains that there is a conformational changes once the substrate binds with the active site. Excuse me, students. हेलो। हाँ हाँ। हम्म, हाँ हाँ. त्याचे काय डिटेल्स पाहिजे का? तुम्ही विचारलं का ते? बरं बरं. मग ठीक आहे, मी सध्या एक लेक्चर करतो. मी नाही का तुम्हाला कॉन्टॅक्ट करायला लावतो आणि सगळ्यांची कॉन्फिगरेशन तुम्हाला वाटलंच पाठायला हे करतो, मदत करतो. हो ठीक आहे. Hello. Sorry for interruption. Another theorem which also explains the enzyme mechanism of enzyme action is the substrate strain theory. Actually, this is a little bit a combination of induced fit model with the separate characteristics of the substrate strain theory. That means after the attachment of the substrate to the active site, there is straining force is given by the active site on the substrate. That's why there is a decrease in the activation energy and ES complex is formed and there is a further reaction it takes place. In fact, if you compare these three well-known theorems regarding the explanation of the enzyme action, in fact, a combination of the induced fit model with the substrate strain is considered to be the operative in the enzymatic action. So, after the studying at the molecular level or electromagnetic study of the enzymatic action, it has been found that the lock and key model is not able to explain it properly, whereas substrate strain theory and induced fit model, they are comparatively able to explain the enzymatic activity more properly, and which is according to what is found during the studies. These are the silent features of the active site. Active site, as you know, that they are the small portion of the overall enzymatic sites. These are the active features, occupies only a small portion of the molecule. They are situated in the crevices of the molecule. Binding of substrate to active site depends on the alignment of specific groups. These groups may realign themselves to provide a unique conformational orientation. So actually this third point, it actually explains the induced fit model. That means once the substrate comes in the vicinity to the active site, there is conformational changes, that is alignment and realignment within the active site so as to get fit with the substrate, and there is a chances of ES complex formation. Next is the substrate binds to enzyme at active site by the now non-covalent bond. And it is proved that the binding between the substrate and the active site is with non-covalent bonds. The amino acid groups directly participate in making and breaking the bonds which are present in the active site along with the substrates, some of the amino acid linkages. It is not a rigid structure. That active site is not a rigid structure. It also explains the that induced fit model. And then serine is the most frequently found amino acid in the active site. Serine is the most frequently found amino acid in the active site. So these are the important features which are shown by the active site, and everybody should be aware of this, all the important features of the active site. Now another important, very important, what we can say, the factors affecting velocity of enzyme reaction. Coming to the very first, that is the pH, the hydrogen ion concentration. Most of the enzymes shows their activity within 4 to 9. However, some enzymes are optimum pH are more or less than the 4 to 9. Example is the pepsin to arginase is 9.9, alkaline phosphatase. It also shows the higher optimum pH at around 10 to 11, 11 to 12, around 11 to 12 pH. So if you study the pH, effect of the pH on the enzyme activity, you can draw a plot. If you studying that on the y-axis, you take the rate of chemical reaction. On the x-axis, you take the pH from 0 to 14 onwards. You can also mention the number of pH here. And if you go on increasing the pH around the vicinity of that chemical reaction at which the chemical reaction is taking place, initially the rate of chemical reaction will go on increasing up to certain peak level. And if you still go on increasing the pH, afterwards the reaction speed of reaction will be decreased to if you, and still if you go on increasing the pH, at the extreme the reaction rate of chemical reaction will be near about zero. So at the extreme levels of pH, whether it is acidic or basic type, the reaction speed will be minimum. Whereas in between at a neutral pH, the reaction specificity, reaction of chemical reaction speed is much higher. So it is mentioned here in the most of the chemical reactions or enzymes are they are active at around 4 to 9 pH. Few exceptions are there. Pepsin, which is more active in the stomach, that's why it requires a less pH. Arginase, it is more active in the alkaline pH. And optimum pH is the pH at which the chemical reaction is at a peak level. It has a highest level, and it is around 6 to 8 pH for most of the enzymes. And the graph you will be getting here is the bell-shaped graph. Here you can see it is a bell-shaped graph you are getting. So this is effect of the pH on the rate of chemical reaction, or on the effect of enzyme on a chemical reaction. Another factor is the temperature. Temperature is also having the same type of effect on the enzymatic activity. If you plot in the same manner on the y-axis, increasing the enzyme action or rate of chemical reaction. On the x-axis, if you plot from 0 to onwards temperature. Initially, if you go on increasing the temperature, rate of chemical reaction will be increasing up to a certain peak level, and that level is also called as the optimum temperature. And if you still go on increasing the temperature, the rate of chemical reaction is going to decrease, not going to increase. So here also at extreme levels of temperature, just like extreme levels of pH, the rate of reaction is least, whereas at a body near about body temperature or at around 30 to 40 degrees Celsius, the rate of chemical reaction is most of the times is higher. So optimum temperature may be defined as a temperature at which enzyme shows a maximum activity. The exact value of optimum temperature is depend upon the individual enzyme. So it is separate from all the enzymes, whether it is a optimum temperature or optimum pH. It is different for different enzymes. And optimum temperature for animals is 37 to 44 degrees Celsius, whereas it is for plants it is 50 to 60 degrees Celsius. As most of the plants, they are actually facing the daylight sunlight, the daytime sunlight. So it is adapted to the higher temperature, whereas humans, they can have the locomotion, or the animals, they can have the locomotion, they can come to the shelter, they can have the shelter. That's why the temperature required to carry out the chemical reaction in there can be adapted to the less as compared to the plants. One more terminology which is very important when you consider the temperature as a factor: Q10 or temperature coefficient. Q10 or temperature coefficient is the effect on the chemical reaction as and when you increase the environmental temperature by 10 degrees Celsius. So what is going to happen when you increase the temperature by 10 degrees Celsius, and that whether it is increases or decreases, that effect is nothing but the Q10. And in between 0 to 40 degrees Celsius, Q10 is said to be 2. That means in between 0 to 40 degrees Celsius, at any point, if you increase the temperature by 10 degrees Celsius, say for example from 15 to 25 degrees Celsius, the rate of chemical reaction will be double. But it is not true when you go on increasing the temperature more than 40 degrees Celsius. The effect will be different. So, definition point of view, Q10 is the effect of a rise in the temperature on the rate of chemical reaction when you increase the temperature by the 10 degrees Celsius. Next factor affecting enzyme activity is the time. The time required for the completion of enzyme reaction depends upon the change in the temperature and pH from its optimum. So if the temperature and pH, they are at optimum level, the time required for the chemical reaction to be taken place will be obviously very less, as the enzyme definition itself suggests. Enzyme concentration can affect the velocity on the enzyme reaction is directly proportional to the enzyme. So if there is high, there is optimum level of substrate is there, optimum level of rest of all the pH is there, optimum level of temperature is there, and if you go on increasing the enzyme concentration, obviously the rate of chemical reaction will be increasing irrespective of the how much product being formed. So it will be directly proportional to the enzyme concentration. Another is the substrate concentration, effect of the substrate concentration on the rate of chemical reaction. If you plot the graph of x-axis with the substrate concentration and y-axis rate of chemical reaction, you will be finding that if you go on from zero, if you go on increasing the substrate concentration, you will be getting a straight line. Initially, that a straight line, and that straight line will be up to certain level. If you still go on increasing the substrate concentration, the graph will leaning towards the x-axis. That means initially the rate of the speed of the chemical reaction is being not that much fast, which was there earlier. It is becoming little bit less as compared to previous phase. And third phase is the if you add after third phase, the graph becomes parallel to the x-axis. That means irrespective of how much substrate concentration you are going to add, the rate of chemical reaction will not be get increased. So this is a Michaelis-Menten plot depicting and this graph of x-axis of substrate concentration and y-axis of the rate of chemical reaction is said to be Michaelis-Menten plot, and this is a Michaelis-Menten equation. It stands for velocity of chemical reaction is equal to Vmax into S divided by Km plus S. And it is having the three phases. One is a linear first phase is A phase, linear phase, second is a curve phase, and third is the almost change phase. Almost unchanged, sorry. Another way of plotting is the Lineweaver and Berg plot. In this, you have to just what you're supposed to do here is the just reciprocal, make the reciprocal of the Michaelis-Menten equation, and you will be getting and manipulate in such a way that you will be getting a straight line y is equal to ax plus b format equation will be there. So standing here or giving it in the form of this, you will be getting the Lineweaver and Berg plot. So only one, what you are doing here, just to revert this equation upside down and solve it such a that you will be getting A divided by y is equal to Km divided by Vmax into 1 by S is plus 1 by Vmax. And it is nothing but the straight line y is equal to in the form of y is equal to ax plus b. And if you plot on the y on the graph, if you take y in the form of 1 by v and x in the form of 1 by s, you will be getting one intercept of the x-axis, which is stands for the minus 1 by km value, and intercept of the y-axis, it stands for the 1 by vmax. So actually the purpose of the Lineweaver-Berg plot is to actually calculate, actually the draw out the Km value. That is what the purpose of the Lineweaver and Berg plot. Coming to the other factors, effect of activators. Activators, as the name suggests, are those substances which increase the activity of certain enzymes. In absence of these activators, loses the enzyme activity. Example here, you can say amylase requires chloride ions, then cytochrome requires iron ions, magnesium requires hexokinase requires magnesium ions, glucokinase requires magnesium ions. So these are the effectors, and in the absence of these effectors, the enzymic activity is not possible. So they are just like a cofactors. Effect of a product concentration. If the product of reaction is accumulated, the rate of chemical reaction is decreased, and this is called as product feedback inhibition. This is called as a product feedback inhibition, and it is been very important. Effect of inhibitors. Another factor is inhibitors are those substances which inhibit, stops, or reduces the enzyme activity. Example here is the cyanide. You know that the cyanide inhibits the cytochrome oxidase, fluoride inhibits the enolase. This cytochrome cyanide, this is a very well known example. Cyanide inhibits the cytochrome oxidase, which is required for the action of the cytochrome oxidase, which is required for the electron transport chain pathway to be taken place. And fluoride inhibits the enolase. Actually, this property of fluoride inhibiting enolase is required for the glycolysis to be taken place. It is one of the important enzyme for to glycolysis. And while taking the blood sample for the glucose estimation, it is being collected in the fluoride bulb. That means there is a fluoride in that bulb, that collecting test tube. And the purpose is to stop the activity of the enolase, and via that it stops the glycolysis. So when you take the want the glucose estimation to be done of the any blood sample, serum sample, or plasma sample, it has to be taken into the fluoride bulb to stop the further glycolysis to be taken place in that bulb. And via that you will be getting the exact glucose concentration in the given blood sample. So this is all regarding the today's topic of the enzyme. In that especially was seeing today the properties of the enzymes along with specificity, and then reaction specificity, substrate specificity, then coenzyme, and the factors affecting enzyme activity. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you very much for your kind listening.